And we're live.
We're on.
All right, so this is Dev Pirates Radio. This is where we're going to be doing, I guess, bi-weekly challenges, and they're going to consist anywhere from programming challenges to graphics challenges to just design challenges. And each challenge should only take between a few hours to up to maybe 12 hours to complete. That does not include research time or anything like that. And the purpose of this is just to have fun and to get better as developers and in various different things. So we'll even do maybe some music challenges, maybe some drawing challenges.
I dread both of those.
Yeah, well, everyone has to get better at everything.
Another reason for doing this is that we wanted to kind of build a community of people that help each other get better at stuff. So
yeah, and also to have fun.
Fun.
Have fun.
Fun is a four-letter word.
These aren't supposed to be like. They're supposed to be a little bit challenging, but they're not supposed to be like super challenging. They're supposed to be something that any developer should, even beginner developers, should be able to take some time to consider and then be able to complete. So they're more for fun than super challenging. We may do some really challenging ones eventually, but mostly they're going to be aimed at just being able to get done in 2 weeks with little to no time.
Because that's all we have.
Right. Well,
little
for now.
Yeah.
I'll get the podcast site up this week, and so probably by the time you're done or I'm done editing it, I should be able just to upload the MP3, and then the podcast site should be ready to go.
Okay. All right then.
So the show's format is going to be pretty basic. We'll discuss the challenge. We'll talk about, we'll show off our solutions. It looks like we can do it inside of by sharing our screens. And then we'll talk about the research done, discuss our methods and any tricks, hacks, or bad coding. And then we'll discuss our next show's challenge. And that's going to be the basic format of the show for now.
Yep, and we'll try and keep it pretty quick.
So I'll let you do the intro since this one was your challenge.
All right. For those of you who aren't familiar with Conway's Game of Life, a quick wiki search will show you that it was made up by, it was kind of a brain exercise by Conway. Perhaps I shouldn't be doing this off the hip. Hold on one second. I should have been more prepared. Okay, so this is from Wikipedia. The Game of Life is also simply known as Life. It's a cellular automation devised by the British mathematician John Horton Conway in 1970. It's a zero-player game, meaning that really you don't do anything with it. There's no interaction with the player. You just create a start condition, and then it plays itself. There's 4 basic rules. Oh, sorry, I should probably tell you exactly how it looks. It's a 2-dimensional map of just cells, and if they're alive, they're usually colored in. If they're not, then they are blank. That can either mean white or black, depending on your way of making it. So each one of these cells has a rule, 4 rules actually. And these rules go like this. Any live cell with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies, as if caused by underpopulation. Any live cell with 2 or 3 live neighbors lives on to the next generation. Any live cell with more than 3 live neighbors dies, as if by overcrowding. And any dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors becomes a live cell, as if by reproduction. Okay, so we've got 3 rules that apply to live cells and one rule that applies to dead cells. And it's pretty simple. You just have to well, I guess we can start talking about how we implemented these 4 rules. Matt, why don't you go first? I want to look at your code. Did you share that with me?
Well, it's a web page, so all the code is. I didn't obfuscate it in any way, so it's all just there.
All right.
The link. Do you need the link?
Yeah. You can toss that in the chat here.
All right. So, which chat here?
On the video.
My chat. There it is. All right.
All right. devpirates.com/challenges/life/life.html. Okay.
All right. So I just did it in HTML and JavaScript. Very basic site. I used a style sheet, and I'm using a library called MooTools because I really like that JavaScript library. It makes my life easier, especially for prototyping like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just set up a very basic HTML page. It has some input fields, initial life percentage, the width and the height of the map, and then at the bottom I have a display that shows which turn and how many cells are living at that time. And then I have a div where I put the grid, and then everything else is handled in the JS. For research, I guess we can talk about the research. I'll talk about my research, which was very small. I read your blog post, and then I thought about how I wanted to do it. I figured I might as well just use I decided to go with the JavaScript and HTML because it was really easy and quick, and I like JavaScript.
Yeah.
And I figured I can create something pretty quick and with a lot of very basic options to it. So I can just say which percentage of life I want, what the width and height of the map is going to be, and then start and let it go. So that's pretty much all the research I did. And then so I guess your turn to discuss your research.
My research had to do with implementing it in Java. I wrote mine in Java, so I looked up it. I thought originally I was just going to go with a text area, and I would just modify the text area so that it would, I don't know, be X's for dead and O for alive or something like that. But instead, I actually wrote it to be buttons. So I used mine isn't as moldable as yours. Mine is 40, it's 40 across and 15 down buttons. And but yeah, my research was just into how to make animations in Java FX, because I didn't want to have to deal with swing and all that. So yeah.
Next, our next thing is we'll discuss our methods. So, like I said before, I was using JavaScript, using the MooTools library. So, first thing I did was I did initial grid loading that included the random cells, and I don't know, I like to use this random method. It might take a little bit extra time to set up, but it will make sure that, like, if you chose 99% life, it won't take forever to select the random locations for the life. Mm-hmm. One of the ways to make sure you have like 99% life is you have to loop until you hit a cell that's open, right?
Sure.
And so otherwise you're not guaranteeing the percentage of life.
Right, or you do 99 in a row or whatever divisor or something.
Right, but you want the life to be randomly generated in random squares.
Right. So that
so
would be...
like the first few can go pretty quick. You probably won't even hit any, and then when you get up higher, you'll start to hit. Oh, well, this cell's already taken, so I have to do another random number, get another one.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to do is I just like to create an array of all the cells that are possible, and then I will take a random number from that length, and whichever random cell I get, I remove from that list. And so at the end, when you get to like, if you were doing like 99% life and you're at your 99th cell, it takes the same amount of time to get that random location as it did to get the first one.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
That's the kind of method I like to use. I get a whole list of all the possible values that can be used, and then as I start taking them away, or as I start selecting them, I remove them from the available options. So I don't have to worry about random numbers overlapping or looping forever until I get an empty square.
Mm. So each actual time you iterate through there, you're going to be removing an option?
Yes.
So I guess that makes it a little bit faster each time too.
Right. So if I have like 1 through 10, and I get 4, now 4 is gone, then I have 1 through 3 and 5 through 9. I mean, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got
it gets rid of that one cell. So, and then I'll just do a random number 1 through 9 now, and whichever one I get, that cell gets taken away, and then I'll do a random number 1 through 8. Anyway, that's the method I like to use for random generation, because if you have like high percentages, to guarantee the percentage, it takes a long time to. It could possibly take a long time to iterate until you get an empty spot.
Mm-hmm. How did you deal with your edge cases?
What edge cases?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the x and y coordinates of something, and you try to look at -1, you'll get an out of bounds, right?
Right. Well, I'll get to that. So I did initial grid loading. That was it. The random thing was the biggest challenge for that part. Then I had the drawing function, which was really easy. Just did however many rows and however many columns. I stored everything in a one-dimensional array. It's another thing I kind of like to do. Even if it's a two-dimensional thing, I only use a one-dimensional array.
Okay, so what do you do? At the end of the width, you add a break?
Yep.
Okay.
Or you can use modulus. Or you can just use if you look through my code, you notice that my for loops, I do for row is less than height, and for column is less than width. So I'll still iterate through as if it's a two-dimensional grid, but to get the cell value, I just multiply row by width and add the column value to it, and that gives you the number.
Okay.
So it's like using a two-dimensional array, but it's only one-dimensional. So if you need to do some other kind of iterating, you don't have to do 2 loops every time. So notice the next thing I do is the cell evaluations. And one of the things I do is I just loop through every element, and I see if it's alive or dead, or nothing happens, basically. And then I just loop through each one, every element in that one-dimensional array. I don't have to do 2 different for loops.
Okay.
So what you're talking about is my inside of my cell evaluation function, something I called life count, and that counted all the life around the cell.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was this is probably a little sloppy, but I took I did a for r equals -1 of the current cell to plus, as long as it's less than or equal to +1 of the current cell. And then I just looped through that for each row. So if it was like the top left corner, say this is the first one we check, it's going to be -1, and then it's going to loop through. And I do the same thing for column, -1 and +1.
And
then
JavaScript doesn't throw an error for going outside of the bounds like that, or is R an element?
There's no bounds to go out of. The only time I need to check is if I'm going to actually check the bounds.
Oh, okay.
So basically what I do is I check to see if the column is greater than 0 and less than the width, basically inside of all the values a column can have.
Mm-hmm.
And if that passes, then I check the row. Well, first I check the row, because I don't want to loop through all the columns if the row is invalid. So as long as the row is is in the allowed values, then I'll go through and I'll loop through for the columns. And I'll do the same check. As long as the column is a valid column, then I check both row and column to make sure that they're not outside of the bounds.
Okay, I see
So
that.
if it passes those two if statements, then what I will do is I'll make sure that I'm not the current cell. And if I'm not the current cell, then I will check the value of the cell, and if it's got a value greater than 1, then it's alive, and so I'll count it. I'll just increment the counter, and then I'll return that count for each cell.
Now, I see that you've got these if statements separated. Do you have a rule of thumb, like you only do 2 conditions at most for an if you can help it?
Well, I like to be able to read through an if statement and see what it means. So if there's like 50 different values in an if statement, that's not something you can just read and see. So I will sometimes separate if statements if I need to.
I
but
appreciate
in this
that.
case, I never had to.
Yeah, well, we're pretty pressed for time, so keeping your code readable is still very nice. So
yeah, well, you get used to certain things. That was the cell evaluations. That was the one question you had before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just worked on making displays and counts. I did input validation to make sure you couldn't insert invalid numbers. I didn't check nans though, but they just evaluate to 0.
Okay.
And then I did testing to make sure everything was good after all that, and then everything worked. Cool. I guess I can share my screen and you can see how that works.
You didn't have very much debugging to do?
Well, I did debugging while I was working on it.
Okay.
But the testing I do is after all that. And see, there it is. I also added in an interval in JavaScript, which means that it will run I do like half a second intervals. So every half a second is a turn. And so it will just auto play.
Okay.
I do 25% life, starts up and goes. What'd you have? What was your width and height?
I did 50 and 50.
50 and 50. It's a little big on my screen.
Yeah, but it looks good.
One thing I did notice though is there's some things that will become stationary objects, like this square right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those shapes are known, and if you look through the wiki, and even there's a Game of Life website which we should mention. I think it's gameoflife.com. Anyway, so yeah, there are a lot of shapes that will constantly either produce things or just sit there or just alternate. Like you can get a bar that'll be 3 up, and it'll switch from being 3 up to 3 horizontal.
Yeah, I notice all those happen all the time.
Yeah.
And then that's it. So I have turns at the bottom. I'll show you what turn you're on and how many cells are alive. Nice. And that was it.
Nice.
So that's my Game of Life. And then I guess you talk about your methods.
Yeah, I will walk you through mine. Unfortunately, I'm not running Linux right now. I might be able to run my application, but hold on. Let me see if I actually can, because that would be nice. Because I built it all in Linux using Sublime, and I don't even know if it'll run in my Eclipse here.
Yeah, I happen to like Sublime. That's my favorite, currently my favorite text editor.
Yeah.
I will even, when I'm using Visual Studio, I will copy like an entire file out to Sublime and then manipulate all the things very quickly and then copy it right back in, and everything's awesome. It's usually a lot faster. Another thing that I tend to sometimes use it for is at work. Sometimes I have to set up. Sorry, I'm just trying to fill time while you're doing something.
I appreciate that.
At work, we have to set up these things called unit tests, and unit tests take a long time to set up, no matter how you do them, because they're unit tests. So they're a pain in the butt. They take a long time to set up, and they're annoying. But Sublime makes that a lot less annoying because I can just copy something over and then do everything all at once, and then I have a unit test ready to go in the 10 to 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And then just test, make sure everything's good, and then I have to do another unit test that's almost exactly the same, but I edit Sublime, and then it can do lots of things at once, and it's good to go in another few minutes. And so
Yeah.
unit test is beauty with this, with Sublime.
Yeah.
Then there's also times where I have to generate queries and stuff, and Sublime is awesome with that also. If you had to do insert multiple rows of data or update.
Yeah, just what I thought. For some reason, my Eclipse doesn't recognize the JavaFX library, so I won't be able to show you that mine works. I'll probably post a photo or a picture, a screenshot of that on the website.
Well, someone should have been a little more prepared.
Well, I'm in Windows. I can't be held accountable. Okay, so how I went about developing was I first had to create a window to run in, and then I had to create a layout. And the layout is actually kind of important for the way I implemented my my game of life in JavaFX. I too only did a one-dimensional array, and I used the flow pane in JavaFX to force new lines on my buttons. You know, like you know what the buttons I'm talking about. They're not like they're just like a submit button in JavaScript. But if you were able to run my program on your local box, or if you look at the picture that I'm going to post later, then you will see that they don't look like buttons because I turned them all into one-dimensional colors. So they'll actually look more like divs, kind of like Matt's web version. Anyway, so the very first thing I did is I created an array list. But then I realized I needed a special data type for my array list, so I created a cell. A cell class. So the array list is full of these cell classes. I made 600 of them, 15 rows, 40 columns, and each cell has its own elements. It has a Boolean telling you whether or not it's alive, a Boolean telling you whether or not it will live into the next iteration, an int X and an int Y for the horizontal and vertical location. I don't need to go into the constructor and how that plays out, I guess. Well, maybe I could. Okay, so each one of these cells, when it's created, it uses the where did I put that? Sorry, I'm just trying to look at my create function. Here it is. Okay, so it's looking for 15 elements, and it's creating them using the values of I and j. So there's a nested for loop here. So the value of j is going to be the x, and the value of I is going to be the y. And inside the constructor, it calls math.random, and depending on whether or not that falls within the range I set was less than 0.8, because that kind of got me the number of live cells that I wanted. If it's less than if it's less than 0.8, then it's dead. But if it's over 0.8, it's alive.
So you did a percentage chance each cell could live instead of a percent of the game board that's alive.
Right. And then I guess set pref width just applies to the button size, because the cell actually extends the button class in Java. Okay, and each of these cells has a function called neighbor count. Now, in my game of life main function, or yeah, I guess you could call it the main class, there's a function in there that'll run through every single cell and ask each cell to query how many live neighbors it has. So each cell will when it gets called, it'll say, okay, I'll look at all the cells, and if the X values are less than the current cell's X plus 2, or greater than the current cell's X minus 2. So that'll give you a range of plus or minus 1. And then I did the same thing for the Y. And then I made sure that it wasn't itself, just like you did in yours. And then I said, if this is alive, so if it passes all of those, 4 nested if statements, it says if it's alive, then you add it as a neighbor. And then once it's done going through all of the cells in the array, it'll return that number and set it to the int that each cell has. So each cell has this field int neighbors, which is an int, and it counts how many neighbors it has. So depending on that, after every single cell is counted, then you go through and evaluate how many neighbors it has. And depending on how many neighbors it has, obviously in comes those 4 rules. So it evaluates each of those 4 rules, sees which one applies to it, and that's all in my update function. One thing you'll notice is that Matt's code is probably easier to read. Partially probably because it's in JavaScript, but also partially because I'm still learning Java. So, and I also wrote this in about 2-3 hours.
Yeah, I spent looks like about 2.5 hours of mine.
Okay, so we spent about the same amount of time. But yours looks better because you've been doing it longer and you're more awesome than me.
Also because I get picky about how everything's formatted.
Yeah.
I think if you get a little bit picky about it, you tend to notice bad formatting faster.
Right.
And that can help you save you time when you're looking for unexpected character or whatever pops up when you forget a semicolon.
Right. And I try to follow indentation and stuff like that to make it a little bit more readable. So I don't have all the style that Matt has, but I try to keep the form at least. So I use these in the other for loops. I'm not using what's called an enhanced for loop. If you're new, you won't know what that is, but if you're not, if you've done this a while, you know what an enhanced for loop is. It's been around for a while. Or a for each loop, you might know it as. Okay, so I just go through each of the cells. If it's alive, those 3 rules apply to it. If it's not, the 1 rule applies to it. Otherwise, if none of those rules apply to it, then I just leave it alone.
So I was wondering, for your create, why did you use INJ instead of something a little clearer like row and column?
Actually, I thought about that. I was thinking about that last night as I was going to sleep. I was like, you know what? I could have even used X and Y.
X and Y. I like to use row and call.
Yeah.
There's 3. It's 3 characters, and so it's not too much typing, and it clarifies because rows and columns can get surprisingly confusing when you're dealing with for loops.
Right. And yeah, I probably should have. But this is what happens when you have time constraints, people.
So it makes it fun.
Yeah. I appreciate the critique though, because I definitely agree with you that should be what if I was going to update this and say make a better version of it, I would fix that. But since, like we said, we're stressed for time, I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm not going to go in and nitpick.
Well, that's fine.
Okay.
Just things I like to do.
Yeah.
You get used to also the more you program using useful variable names.
Mm-hmm. Even for the normal for loops and stuff like I and the standard one is I.
Yeah, I use I a lot as my iterator in for loops.
Uh-huh.
But for something like row and column, then I usually do row and call.
Yeah,
But if I'm just iterating through something, it's just, for I equals, or int I equals 0, I is less than I plus plus. Or you can do plus plus I. That doesn't matter anymore.
Right. I think that
All
my
compilers optimize.
issue is that I've been reading a lot of testing manuals and stuff because I'm about to take the Oracle OCA 7 Java Associate certification. So, and in their tests and in their books, they have examples of terrible code. And I think that I'm picking them up from the books. So anyway, so yeah, after I check and see how many neighbors they have, and apply the, I changed the Boolean value of live, which, as you might remember, I said it tells this next part whether it's going to live or into the next iteration or not. So after I evaluate all that, I go into another one and says, oh, if this live Boolean is false, then it dies. If it's true, it lives.
I didn't talk about that part of my code, but what I did, I was just using an array of ints. So what I did was, if it was going to die, I would give it a 2, and if it was going to be born, I'd give it a -1.
Okay, so that was the way you handled, because if you updated those numbers
you can't
in
update
the middle
them.
of the iteration,
yeah, then you get a bad game of life. You have to evaluate first and then process.
Mm-hmm. So we both went different ways with that. Interesting.
Well, I didn't want to use a complicated object for each cell.
Uh-huh.
I just figured I could just do it with just ints, and so I did.
Mm-hmm. And I see that. But I did. So anyway, so yeah, after that's all done, that's a cycle. So it creates, it runs through and checks, and then it iterates. And,
how fast did you do your cycles?
What did I set that to?
1 second, looks like.
Yeah, 1,000 milliseconds.
Yep.
Let me do the math here. No, yeah. It's a second. Yeah. I actually provided additional stuff. So even if you don't want to look at the graphical portion of my program, you can just look at the output in the console that you run it from, and it'll print out an exact copy of everything that's showing up in the GUI. So, yeah.
I also noticed my commenting is pretty sparse.
Mine too.
I feel like the code speaks for itself mostly, but you'll also say like small comments like evaluate each cell or if alive, and then I'll say what happens. And
right, and I did try to use certain values like is alive to kind of make the code more readable. But yeah, I should still add some comments like for this iteration, this last one, after you check and see how many neighbors it has and you set the live value, I should say then you go through and kill / resurrect them or whatever. So
kill or birth, whatever.
Sure. So yeah, that's my game of life. It's not pretty, but it's mine.
It's like your face.
I don't have a comeback for that.
All right. Let's see. The next thing is any tricks, hacks, or bad code.
Did you see any bad
One thing
code
I
in
will
mine?
say, yes, tons. I was going to talk about mine, though. It's time to talk about me.
Let's talk about yours.
Um, let's see. Some code I'm not exactly fully happy with. I'm sure I could optimize the neighbor count function, or I called it life count. I was going to call it neighbor count, but life is shorter.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably optimize that. Living or dead, I could probably fix that. Um, 'Cause I could probably combine some of the cases. Like if I combine case -1 and case 1, nothing's going to change. Everything would still work. So I could get rid of one case. But other than that, I think the life count function was the thing that I could probably be optimized the most. Everything else didn't need to really be optimized. I think everything else looks pretty good. I wouldn't really change it too much. I don't like to write super complicated code, even if it makes it shorter.
Mm-hmm.
I like to keep everything. I like to keep everything clear as to the purpose of everything.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that creates more lines of code, but I don't really care about lines of code.
Yeah. We're not in a shortest code competition.
Yeah, and I don't think those are very good because sometimes that leads to unreadable code.
But sometimes obfuscation is what you're looking for.
Yeah, if obfuscation is what you're looking for, then go at it, have fun.
I did notice, like, I managed to get away from the edge cases because all of the cells that I have, I never have to go outside of the values because I'm just checking to see what their value is. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying to check the value to the left or to the right. I'm saying check each cell and tell me what its value is. So there was no chance of me evaluating a -1. Does that make any sense?
Wait, you check each cell. Oh, you loop through each cell. See, that
Yeah.
I think could probably use a little bit of optimization.
Sure.
So you're looping through 14 times or 15 times 40 cells for each cell.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at mine, I loop through up to 9 cells per each cell. So there's a little bit of an optimization there.
Yeah, and I could actually speed that up a bit. I can, yeah, I could limit it to only certain values and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, if you did what I did, you can do the same thing. If R, you just loop through -1 to +1,
Mm-hmm.
and if the row is not an acceptable value, you can skip that row entirely.
Right, right.
And then for
Was
the
it?
column, you can just, if this column isn't an acceptable value, you can skip that column.
That's true.
And then that's what I do, and I never evaluate an empty cell that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was there
only
anything that you felt like you kind of hacked, like there something you cheated on?
I don't think so. I think everything is pretty clean. I have one function on my add event. I just add a click event to the button, and that
Mm-hmm.
starts the game when you click on that button. If you click start at any time, it just restarts the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything too hacky in the code. I think it's pretty
Okay.
clear cut. I'm sure someone else would look at it and go and might think otherwise, but I don't think
Yeah.
there's anything too hacky.
Code is like language; it's a matter of taste.
Yeah.
But there's certain language things that most people agree on. I think that's how it works. That's just me.
I think my logic is concise, And so I think that's what I really care about.
Mhm.
So you can read through and you see what everything is supposed to do and what everything is doing, and there's not very much obfuscation going through it. So I
Right.
think if I were to read through this a year from now, having forgotten entirely about it, I think I would have an easy time figuring out what everything does. Oh, my max. Oh, I did max my max width and max height is 50.
Oh, is that true?
That's what I set them for my input evaluations, and
Okay.
their mins are 4 and 4.
If I put in 100, it's just going to stop at 50, but it'll still run.
Yeah, but it
Okay.
will take the value as 50.
Okay. Um, I definitely had some hacks in mind. I think I mentioned already that I used the flow pane to cause the breaks to add a new line. And I
Did you
see
have to
that,
trial and error that?
yes, I did. I had to resize the window to the exact right size to get the 15 by 40. And actually, I left the window resizable just to show you how bad it is to try and hack it that way. But I was just looking for a quick way to get it done because it was late. So there was that. I don't really think there were any other really bad hacks that I did. There's some stuff I could clean up for sure, like my for loops where it's int I starts at 1 and int j starts at 1, and I could easily have just gone int I equals 0, and then set it to less than or equal to 15 or whatever. There's a million things I could have done to kind of make it a bit easier to read.
I usually start at 0
Yeah,
and
that
0.
you should start at 0 because 1-based things are dumb.
That's Visual Basic.
Well, and there's certain things that should be 1-based, and like the length attribute of an array. I guess it's not 1-based because you can have a 0-length array. Anyway, you know what I mean, because the length of 1 means you have an element at 0. So the
Yes.
translation's a bit weird.
And I don't know. I think it's better to get used to it though.
Yeah. Yeah, and I should have just went at 1 and I less than 15 and j less than 40, which would make that code a little bit nicer to look at. Because
Well,
we like round numbers.
I think that's everything.
I think we're good. So what's the next challenge, Matt?
Date parsing challenge. So I'm going to give you a list.
You didn't like it.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a list of dates in various formats, and your code is supposed to take each of those and convert them into a specific date format, and then sort them from the newest to oldest dates.
Fun.
So I think I'm only going to do 5. And they're going to be plain words. So February 22nd, 2003, all in words.
Okay.
Is one of the examples.
But you're not going to use like epoch time.
You can use whatever time you want, but you're going to have to format it into month, day, year.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want to the date. I don't care. You convert it to an epoch time if you want. I probably will just convert it to a JavaScript date because I'll probably just do it in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
I like JavaScript for fast prototyping.
And you don't want people using like a library or something, right? We
No.
need to make our own parsing functions.
You can use a library for anything except for parsing the strings. Like if you want to use a library for displaying or use a library for creating objects or whatever, that's fine. But the main goal is you're going to have a function that converts it from the input strings into an actual date, and then you're going to have to sort another function, or maybe in the same function, I don't care how you do it. You sort that date, you sort all the dates in order from newest to oldest. Those have to be your original code, your own code.
Okay.
Everything else can be libraries galore.
Okay. Sounds like fun. You'll put that up in a blog post.
Yeah, I'll put that up in a blog post, including the 5 date examples.
Cool.
And then that should, I think that covers all of it. So hope you had fun.
Yeah, I did have fun. It's the first time I've been able to, well, I played around with Conway's Game of Life before, but I never actually finished it. So this was good.
Well, make sure you think about the next challenge too, because you only have 2 weeks to come with the next challenge and complete this one.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. This is stuff I can handle, especially if you let me use it in Perl.
Yeah, you can use whatever language you want. The thing is, the solution doesn't really require a specific language.
Right. I just meant Perl because that's what I'm most familiar with and most comfortable in. So, yeah, that's why I was saying, you know, if you want to limit to a certain programming language, that'll be difficult for me since I'm not experienced with many of them. So.
Oh, I should also mention they are U.S. dates.
Ah.
So that should make it a little easier.
Oh, right. So you're not going to be changing up the format of like the first one is the month or the second one is the month.
No, but I did write something a while ago in JavaScript that could handle that.
Yeah, and I really don't think that would be that difficult to handle. I think people will have fun with this. This will be good.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, good night then.
That's a show. All right.